Mother's pollinator garden. Making this video, the city's complaining wants things cut down in the yard, and we are sure that the law, when it says vegetation, doesn't refer to pollinator plants, but we can't get a straight answer out of the city as to exactly what species need to be cut down, because they never really thought about it, I'm sure. But anyway, just wanted to start with the milk plant here. Technical term is milkweed. I like to say milk plant because it's not a weed. It's actually important habitat for the monarch butterfly. The Fish and Wildlife Service is working with local authorities to try and create habitat for the milk plant so that the monarch butterfly doesn't have to go on the endangered species list. So it's fairly clear that this plant would not be considered under the vegetation, which has to be cut to 6 inches. It's growing there with the iris. We had originally planted iris there, and the two plants seem to do very well together. The iris comes out in the early spring, as well as some of the violets that my mother has. So the pollinators have something to eat as soon as they come out of hibernation, which is very important. The milk plant then provides habitat throughout the summer. It blooms throughout the summer. Have a lot of pollinators getting nectar from the milk plant, but it's the only place that monarch butterfly larvae can survive. They have to attach to that. So it's important for the monarch butterfly, but it also helps all the other pollinators as well. Got some sticks here that I'm going to grind up for mulch. My mother has a zero landfill yard. Everything is either compost, mulch, or firewood. So we want to make sure that happens. Also wanted to show some of the dirt that washed down from other yards in the neighborhood in the last rainstorm. A lot of the yards, people don't want to use water, but they don't want the city complaining, so they mow their yards very low, which results in a lot of evaporation and a lot of exposed soil when it rains. This entire intersection was covered with sand after the last rainstorm. The city came through and swept most of it, but there was a car parked here. But all of the silt and clay that came out has all washed downstream, and that's something we want to try and avoid. So we don't leave the ground bare, but we also don't want to use a lot of water. And that's one of the benefits of the plant you see here, the Russian sage. We've tied it back because the city doesn't like it, have it cover the sidewalk. I think it looks nice to have it cover the sidewalk, but the city, they like the stark lines of the concrete rather than the soft lines of the flower. So we've tied it back rather than cut it off because you can probably see there are a lot of pollinators using it at the present time. So we didn't want to cut it off while they're still getting nectar for the winter. They'll need that to hibernate. Got a 4 o'clock plant there, which is for the nighttime pollinators. And then behind that, some of the asters and roses behind the asters. Roses help out in the spring, not the early spring, but they're a good transition from spring to summer. The asters are really the most important plant in a dryland pollinator garden. Here we have some of the iris again, which, as I say, that's a common plant. You wouldn't expect to have people cut that to 6 inches, so we're not going to cut that. Here we have some more of the iris, and then a plant that has a clover-like flower. I haven't been able to identify the plant, but it's not on the noxious weed list, so we are going to leave that. We've got some lamb's quarter in the background, which we are going to harvest for vegetable broth, but we want to do that later in the season, so that when we cook the vegetable broth, we're not generating heat that we don't use. If it's after it turns cold, we can cook the vegetable broth, and then the extra heat will just heat the house. Here's a close-up of the asters. A lot of people don't recognize those as flowers because they just can't wait until they bloom. They do bloom very late in the season. So I wanted to make sure that that's not what the city was talking about when they say cut the vegetation to 6 inches. These asters are growing in areas. This is an area back here which receives nothing but natural precipitation. There's no municipal water used back here at all, and you can see the asters are doing very well. Just saw a pollinator come off of one of the blossoms there. They don't require anything besides natural moisture in Colorado. We've got some more of the Russian sage back here. And the point I wanted to make about the asters, they are habitat for pollinators well into the fall. These will keep blooming. You can see there are a lot of buds there. They'll keep blooming well into November, so that pollinators have a good supply of nectar as they're getting ready to hibernate. And then we have the sunflowers, and there again we're tying these back so they're not laying on the sidewalk. But we don't want to cut them because the blooms are very important. So those are the flowers that we intend to leave. Like I say, I'm making this video so that the city can see that and then let us know. I've been having trouble finding a time to meet with the city, so that this is just a more efficient way of showing them what we're doing. Anyway, thank you for watching.